All right, all right, all right. How's everybody doing tonight on this Wednesday night? Or is it Thursday? Oh, it's Thursday. I'm a day behind. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, I hope everybody's doing okay. Um Thought I'd get on here tonight and, like I said earlier, I was gonna discuss an upload that I did earlier and give you a little bit of feedback instead of just playing a video. So, you know, um, hello, ladies. Thank you for being in the chat. I didn't know if there was going to be anybody in here due to the onslaught of different lives going on right now. They're talking about the topic of the day, which is, IDHAO4, new venue, new judge, and all the above. As far as that information, I'm not gonna get on that because I already spoke on it the other day. So those were my thoughts, and obviously it came into fruition. So I'm not gonna go backwards. But there are a lot of onslaughts on the YouTube street tonight with a lot of different, hear it here first type stuff, and I wish them the best. I wish them the best in their lives or whatever they're trying to accomplish with their not propaganda stuff. Um, I look at stuff like that all day long because like I tell you guys, I work in the criminal justice system, so I'm either a part of it or I'm watching it. For my demonstration, I'm going to need a prop though, so I'm going to turn the camera off and put some music on while I go downstairs to go get my props. So if you guys can just kind of chill and hang out for a second, I'll be right back, okay?
I lost my best friend to 23. She left her body and hovered above me. I saw no shadow, I looked around, searched every building and home that I found. I saw no shadow, but felt the glow. The warmth inside me kept me afloat. It felt like heaven had found my bones and gave me comfort when I feel alone. Now you're gone, I'm alone. I guess it's time to get better. Through the pain, I will go alone. If I fall, break my bones, I will scream even louder. 'Cause I'm not dying alone. I lost my best friend to 23. She left her body and hovered above me. Best friend to 23. I heard the heavens crying above me. They gained an angel, I lost a friend. I felt like dying again and again. I went through hell instead of death, but I keep fighting with each living breath. I saw no way out from where I stood. Felt like the fire had burned me through. Now you're gone, I'm alone. I guess it's time to get better. Through the pain, I will go alone. If I fall, break my bones, I will scream even louder. 'Cause I'm not dying alone. I lost my best friend.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. Like I said, I left my props, so I can't really do my theory without them. So here I am. I don't know. My camera seems kind of hazy. That better? Anyway, let's go ahead and watch that video again. And I want to stop it. Um, I want to stop it wherever I wanted to do the experiment and show you my new theory. Because I believe, when I was watching this earlier, I believe that I found something that I've never thought of before. And I don't know why I've never thought of it, but you see something enough, or you look at something enough, you start looking at it with different eyes. If you didn't see this earlier, I'm going to go ahead and play it for you to watch a little bit, and then I'm going to stop it. And then fast forward. I'm going to fast forward through the music. So somebody asked me, somebody was like, so I spent the whole morning watching your intro. And I was like, oh, I forgot.
Hello, we're here at the National Forensic Academy, and we're in the
I told them that I forgot that I wasn't live, because usually I'm used to being live, so I have to have some music playing in order to give people time to get into the chat. So I forgot that this wasn't live this morning. I was trying to do it so fast. So let's watch this, because this is talking about not only blood evidence, but it's also talking about touch DNA and things like that. So let's go ahead and watch this.
controlled environment of a laboratory, but we're going to demonstrate collection of biological evidence.
Hold on.
Hello, we're here at the National Forensic Academy, and we're in the controlled environment of a laboratory, but we're going to demonstrate collection of biological evidence. Now, biological evidence could be semen, saliva, blood, or other bodily fluids. For demonstration purposes today, we're going to discuss the collection of blood. Given consideration to touch DNA, which is a very sensitive DNA testing, when you grab gloves out of the box, you should always try to grab the base end as opposed to the fingertips, and avoid touching those if possible. So you grab from the bottom end of the glove and put them on. That hopefully avoids getting your.
Okay. Well, here's my theory. Let me lower this from the stage. That way you guys can see me. Man, I've had a hell of a day today with all kinds of stuff. Well, like he was saying, when you get the gloves out of the box, okay, you have one glove, and you usually have a free hand and it's ungloved, right? Y'all can see that, right? You see that? Glove, ungloved. So he turned the glove around like that, and then he opened the bottom tip, right? And he put the glove on. So you have this glove, now you're gloved up. But still, during that whole process, you don't think any skin cells got bothered by the empty hand? You don't think any of these skin cells got bothered and thrown into the air? Okay, so now you have a free hand. So you get the other glove with the gloved hand probably, and you turn it around, but you're still touching the glove. You've still touched the glove part right here. And you have all this opening, unless you're wearing the darkened, jumpsuit or whatever the hell they were talking about. So now you have the gloves on, but microscopically, you don't know all the DNA that's been released into the air, into the area that you're around. And then he's going to talk about double gloving. So by this point, if you're going to double glove, this glove right here should be okay. But this one is the first one, or this one should be okay. But this one is the second one you put on. So if you put this glove on next, I'm not going to put it on because it's kind of tight. But if you put this glove on next and you've touched it with this glove, like I told you, all the DNA, all the skin cells, especially if you're sweating and you don't realize it, it's going all over these surfaces. So let's watch him and then I'll explain my theory. Hold on. Hold on a second. I'm getting ahead of myself here. I feel like I've never done this before.
Getting your DNA on the fingertip portion of the glove that you're going to be touching evidence with. Another consideration would be to have 2 pair of gloves on. So the first pair of gloves will be what you may use to write your notes with, or if you have to take a phone call in the crime scene, you could always use that first layer of gloves for that type of stuff. And then if you're going to do evidence collection, you actually go to a second pair of gloves with the same idea in mind. If possible, grab from the base end of the glove. This is ideal for personal protection as well, because once you've got 2 pair of gloves on and you've collected a sample, you simply take the outer layer off and discard that.
Okay, so did you see how he took those gloves off, right? He took those gloves by grabbing the bottom. So if this glove was on my hand, let me put it on just to show you. You'd put the glove on, and to take it off, you'd grab the tip right here, and you scrape it off. But still think about everything that's on the surface of this glove that was transferred to the inside of this glove. People don't think about all this when it's come to like transfer skin cells, transfer possibly hair fibers, clothes fibers, any of that stuff can be trapped in these gloves. Well, as he's going to show you, between these gathering of evidence here, they changed their gloves. What I'm trying to show you is the perpetrator that night, whoever it could have been, could have changed their glove after finishing what they did in one room before they went into another. Like, let's say they took their gloves off, put on some new pair of gloves. That's how the DNA could have been transferred to the knife sheath. That's how there could have been different DNA in the blood if they found any or any of that. So that's my theory is, some of the skin cells could have been transferred from one to the other onto the surface. And you just never know how many times this individual, if it was Mr. Koberger, how many times he practiced this at the house. Because it didn't even necessarily have to be the night of the murders. It could have been like the night before, the morning before, it could have been at any time. And if you practice something, like if you were going to dust my desk right here, or the microphone, or the mouse, or whatever, I can promise you there's plenty of DNA on here that is mine. Just by, process of elimination. So think about that a little bit. Because there's times when people say they think that one little particle was all they found on the button snap. But in reality, how much more was around the crime scene that was unfounded? And the other day we heard Steve talking about under the leg. So I don't know what that's all about. I don't know what that's all about, but I thought that was interesting as well because why this doesn't make sense to some people is because it's scientific, you know. So, you know, because it's scientific, you just have to think deeper than just what you have in front of you. Do you think the person shaved their knuckles or arms hair just in case? That's a good question. That's a very good question because I have plenty. I don't have a lot of arm hair under here, but I do have like not extremely hairy arm, but he could have shaved everything, you know, except the eyebrows. And that might have been one thing he needed to shave to, if it was this individual, to have saved him, you know. But think about that again. While you're taking off the gloves, you're reaching in and you're pulling them out. And then you're reaching in and you're pulling them out. So once you have one glove off, you have exposed hand. Unless you have two pairs on, you reach one, reach one, reach one, reach one, then you start all over. But you're still going to have one hand exposed without a glove on it. So there's no way, in my opinion, that this individual would have been able to do this, even if gloved up. So here's another thing I want y'all to think about, okay? Because I watch these shows all day long, and they have some immaculate theories and some immaculate stories, and this and that and the other. More power to them. Think about this: if Mr. Koberger was gloved up when he went home to Pennsylvania, while they were surveilling him, they saw him wear gloves to the grocery store. They saw him wearing gloves while he was taking the trash out. You don't think he wore gloves after the next day? Like the next day after the murder, that morning? You don't think if he was throwing away any trash, he was wearing gloves? You don't think if he was cleaning up around the house, he wasn't wearing gloves? You think that this person just waited to get to Pennsylvania to suddenly start exhibiting this pattern? It doesn't happen that way. I would say that this individual was probably doing this all along. Because why would he be so concerned if they could get his DNA in Pennsylvania or whatever the reason was? He was wearing gloves all around town, but he wouldn't have done it in Pullman while he was there after this murder. Answer me that. You don't think that this individual would have been exhibiting those kind of behaviors during that time as well? Or did he just wait until he got to Pennsylvania to say, oh, now I'm going to start to glove up because they might get my DNA? You gotta think outside the box a little bit. Let's get back to the video.
And you still have a pair of gloves on in the crime scene so that you're not contaminating anything, or more importantly, not getting contamination on yourself. So there's really three different types of stains we're going to talk about in this presentation. Although in real life situations, there's several other. There's things like touch DNA and several other situations where you may be asked to collect biological evidence. For demonstration purposes, first we're going to discuss the collection of wet blood stains. So for that, the first thing that you're going to want to do is fill out a swab box. Swab boxes are commercially available. They're very nice for containing the swabs that you've collected the samples with. And it's easiest if you'll fill out the information on the swab box, such as a case number, and then go into the collection
So if you didn't watch this earlier, it kind of goes, it was
of
messing,
the sample itself.
up.
The information that you should put on a swab box is the case number, the date. Some people prefer to put the time of collection and your name and item number at a minimum. So once you've filled out the swab box, go ahead and close the one end.
Let me pause it again because I just thought of something. You see how I just grabbed this bottle? You remember during when people were wearing gloves and when they were wearing masks? You remember why it was so silly for people to be wearing gloves? Because anything you touch with your glove, you got off from the surface. So even if you're wearing gloves, you may not transfer your fingerprints, but you're going to get everything that's on this surface, whether it be your DNA, whether it be, somebody else's DNA. There's going to be all kinds of stuff on this that's going to be transferred to the glove. So think about that as well, because these gloves are not foolproof. So, a lot of times I've never been a criminal, so it's not like I'm showing you something that a criminal would do, but they don't think that deeply when it comes to committing a crime. They think just because I'm wearing gloves, I'm not transferring anything. But everything you touch, you're taking a part of whatever you touch with you on the glove. And unless you're changing gloves after you touch one thing, that's what you're doing the whole time. So this might not be popular amongst people right now. And I'm not saying this is how it happened, but I am telling you that it's a good possibility that this is how it happened.
Recommended to use prepackaged sterile swabs. Some of them come packaged in one, some of them come packaged in two, but this should be done as opposed to the large boxes that contain a group of just open swabs. We always want to make sure that we're gloved up with fresh gloves in between each sample. Since this is one stain, we can go ahead and collect them with using swabs in one hand. The idea in mind here is to get as much of this sample on the swabs as possible. So twirling them around to make sure that they're fully covered is ideal. Because these swabs are collected from the same sample, they can be packaged together. So if the situation is you've got this wet of a sample, a lot of times what you want to do is dry it first. And there's many different methods of setting up a drying chamber or whatever. This is simply one of them. So once you've got the swabs dried, they're then packaged into the box.
And then the video will freeze, and then we'll continue on. So I hope that made sense with the glove demonstration, guys. I really do, because
So now we're going to discuss collection of blood stained items where the blood is already dried, which will be the case most of the time. In this scenario, again, fill out the swab box with the pertinent information. Now, because the stain is dried, we're going to need to collect it using a little bit of water. So we want to take some sterile water, either distilled water or sterile water that can be purchased in pre-packaged like this. 1 to 2 drops of water is all that's needed on the swab, because if you put too much, you will be diluting the sample and lessening the chances of getting DNA back in the laboratory. Again, because we're going to collect from one particular stain, these can be done at the same time. The idea in mind is to concentrate as much of that blood on the surface of the swab as possible. And even though that was a relatively small area, you can see that by doing that method, you can get quite a little bit of blood on there, and even some more on the opposite side as well. Once that's done, you want to place it back into the swab container, close it, and package this into a separate paper packaging, either paper or an envelope. We're going to move on to collection of a biological stain that's very small in nature. If you have a very small blood stain, for example, that you need to collect, in order for the laboratory to have the best chance.
So you see how he's shaking his arms around to put those gloves on? And he's not even really thinking about it because he's not being a criminal right now. Even if you're stiff and you're trying to put those gloves on, you're still going to emit some kind of DNA or skin cells. I was also thinking as I pulled these off, they were sweaty from the inside. You know, I used to work in a job where I wore latex gloves a lot and I had to constantly change them. And I noticed one thing for certain is they get sweaty really fast. So as you're taking them off, sometimes you do spray some of your perspiration around the areas and not even realize it. So to think outside the box, I'm thinking that, you know, all the people that say, well, they don't have enough evidence, they don't have enough evidence. Well, you don't know that they don't have more evidence than what I'm talking about right now, because they've been doing this for a job for a long time. So you think they're just going to swab a button snap and say, well, that's all we're going to get. We're good, guys. It makes you wonder how often the Idaho LE changed their gloves, since if they didn't have a lot of end of life crimes, not judging, but I'm sure how often they need gloves. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm sure they do keep a lot though, you know, because you know, when the officers respond to a wreck or, you know, something, some kind of trauma that's going on in a home, you know, a choking or whatever, it's almost mandatory that they wear gloves now. Um, so yeah. So you just never know what you're spraying around microscopically. And that's what DNA is. It's not like the DNA on the button snap was so huge that you could see it with the naked eye. And I don't challenge y'all's intellect by saying that, but there's some people that believe that this is all they have. This is all they have. All the other evidence that's in the PCA is junk. So that one little swab that they have of the knife sheath button is all they got. That and the buccal swab.
Chance of getting DNA, you're going to want to concentrate the blood on the end of just one swab. So in this scenario, we have several different, very tiny in nature stains. Many of these
Yeah, this video was
are
messed
less
up.
than a millimeter in size. So this time, instead of using two, we're going to use just one swab. We're going to make sure that we don't put very much water on it, so just a single drop. And I'm going to concentrate it at the end. Now, what you want to be careful and do is always keep the water a little bit away and drop it down onto the swab, so that if you're using sterile water like this for several different samples, you're not actually touching it to the swab. So we have a drop of water at the end of the swab, and we're going to just concentrate our sample there. Now, if you have a scenario like this where you have several different drops as part of the same pattern, you could collect those together. But if you're down to just even a single drop, you can see that you can concentrate blood on the end of that swab very well just doing that. So again, same scenario. Make sure that the swab box is filled out prior to the collection. Fill the swab box and drop it in. Then package it into paper, never plastic, and label it and identify it.
Okay, so that kind of showed you a very basic understanding of the DNA process on how they swab for that. But I also want to tell you that, somebody mentioned in there, I'm going to pull up the comment. Says that had to be tough on your hands putting new pairs after each sample. Yeah, it is because you wear gloves, and if they're not powdered or dry, so you wash your hands before you put on a new pair. That way you don't, you know, transfer any kind of, like in the area that I worked in, you had to wash your hands every time because you didn't want to transfer any bodily fluids, whether it be, urine or feces or any of that stuff, onto a new pair of gloves and go and work on a new client. You know what I mean? So you wanted to be clean, and what it ended up doing is chopping your hands. And here's the answer to this question. She says, makes you wonder how often the Idaho LE change their gloves if they don't have, well, no, that's not the question I wanted to answer. I already answered that one. You would think they'd want to blood wet and put in a tube right away to avoid contamination with the counter excited. Well, I'm sure that they do that differently on the crime scene. They might put it in a tube. Um, but the reason they want it wet, dry is so it'll soak into the cotton swab. That way, when you draw it out, there's a condensed portion of the blood in the cotton swab rather than on the surface. Because if it's on the surface, then it's going to get on everything that's around whatever that cotton, whatever that Q-tip looking thing is being stored in, if that makes sense. Paper, not plastic. I'd be afraid of the samples getting wet accidentally. This is very interesting. Yes, I thought so as well, because I always hear I always hear a lot about this, and it's never positive. It's never positive. It's never positive about the collection of evidence. It's never positive how they could have collected different types of evidence from different areas of the house. How, even the gloves could play a part in transferring DNA. And here's another question that people take or not a question, but here's another statement that people take and run with. They say, well, think of all the contamination in that house because supposedly they had a party the night before. Well, unless however many people went through Xana's room and Kaylee's or Maddie's room, there wouldn't be any other DNA in those rooms. There would just be the victim's DNA. You know? There'd be just the victim's DNA. And there might be some different DNA of different people that were there, but that's easy for them to eliminate them. And that's how you get your gloves to be usable again, especially if they're inside out. Just like blowing up a balloon. So I'm going to show you some other stuff. I'm not done for tonight, but do y'all have any questions or any kind of things? I mean, I'm not an expert at this, but I know enough about it to explain it to you. And people are going to doubt me. They're going to, talk crap or whatever. But, it's a lot more feasible what I'm talking about than anything that I've heard as far as the evidence um being discovered and placed away, because you know that people have Googled, they've Wikipedia, they've done all kinds of stuff to try to get the expiration of DNA, right? I'm not saying Google's a liar, but Wikipedia is updated by people on a daily. So, that's a good question. That's a good question. Or this is a good statement right here. Great point about the veteran. Since it's a rental, you'd expect different DNA. Yeah, this is a good question as well. Did the K use rubber gloves? Good point. You mean like the thing about any type of glove, whether it be fabric, whether it be rubber, even those really thick welder's gloves, I think those would be harder to transfer DNA from. But even the dishwashing gloves, those they're kind of thick and they're rubbery. Um, but those things you still have to put them on one hand at a time. You can't put them on, like you're not gonna have two pair of gloves on at the same time automatically without putting the others on, and you've already touched these gloves, so they're gonna have whatever DNA or whatever on the palms or on the here are the palms. No, these are the top of the hand. Good Lord, the palms. And they're going to have stuff on there. So if you're putting on another pair of gloves, when you take that glove off, think of what it does when you take that glove off. This glove is rubbing against your hand, and anything that's been on this is going into the air. The same thing with this one. It's going into the air. So I mean, especially if the killer was sweaty, you don't know as he was moving his head around if he was that he wasn't slinging minuscule droplets of sweat that could have dried on the bodies. And you say, well, that's silly. No, it's not silly because you know what? You don't think they swabbed the bodies? No, it doesn't last on years. It lasts probably hours, if that. So I think I've read probably on certain items, 2 to 4, other kind of like wood, metal, and possibly skin. I think it lasts a little longer, but it doesn't last for years. It doesn't last a long time. But in those 12 hours, think of think of this. Yeah, they're going to swab the bodies because you're swabbing for the killer's fingerprints. You're swabbing for any inconsistency on the body, especially around the cuts, especially around the stabs. Because if the killer comes down and stabs you and there's any DNA on the glove, what do you think? Where do you think the DNA was went? Went all around this area, right? Could have even went in your hair. The same thing with the swab. They get one of those little swabs and they basically just swab the skin. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's not as simplified as people think. So they say, well, how did they quickly get him? How did they know it was him? How did they realize that it was him so quickly? Well, I heard earlier something that made a lot of sense. If you have 7 Elantras, okay, 7 Elantras, and 5 of them have license plates on the front. Doesn't that cut down the other 2 that you're looking for without a front license plate? I'm excited all of a sudden. I want to show you this. This is being shipped. It's on its way. If you haven't checked out my merchandise, this is a bucket hat and it says 12 gauge on the side. And you flip up the top and there's like bullet holes underneath the rim. It's really cool. So you might go check out the merchandise if you haven't already. I ordered one of these for myself and I'm excited. I hope it fits. I know that's off topic, but I just saw that and I got a little excited, you know? Um, so think about that a little bit as far as what we're talking about, because I don't believe that he was as cautious as people are giving him credit for. I really don't. Because if you remember early on, the coroner said that it was a very bloody, messy crime scene. So if it was messy and bloody, that means that whoever did it didn't really know what they were doing. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been as messy, you know? But that's just my thought. You know, I'm just thinking out loud right now. Because people want you to believe that this superhuman person went in here, committed these murders, there wasn't any footprints, there wasn't any of this, there wasn't any of that. What makes you think there wasn't? The police only give enough information, the probable cause, to get an arrest warrant. They're not going to put all their evidence out there for the killer to know how to escape detection. And especially if they get a suspect, they're going to want to know, okay, well, this guy's talking about stuff that's not even out there. So how does he know this, or how does she know this? You get what I'm saying? So to say that, you know, they didn't give enough information, or they were sneaky, or they were this, they were that. Think about it like that, on that aspect. You know, because if you're not wanting the killer to be um, onto your next move, or how much you got as far as evidence, why would you let all this information known in the media? You get what I'm saying? Do you think it was only one weapon? I believe so. I believe so. I can't wear hats, but I know what I want. Yeah, it's a pretty cool one. So y'all go check it out. There's beanies in there too. If you don't want a hat, there's beanies, men, women beanies. They're cool. Think there had to be more evidence. Yeah, of course. There's 113 physical pieces of evidence. That's not even counting the forensic evidence. Yeah, the evidence will be telling. But the gloves will tell you, like, as far as the DNA, that's why I'm saying, if they were onto him very early and they did get, let's say they ran his DNA, because people are always like, well, they could have DNA'd him, you know, at the school. They could have got his DNA while he was inside. They could have DNA'd him while he was in the classroom. What makes you think they didn't? What makes you think they didn't? I do too, but there might have been, yeah. I mean, what makes you think they didn't? Especially when that guy found the Elantra at WSU. What makes you think they didn't already DNA the doorknob, or, you know, his apartment? And You're sitting there watching him because I'm sure that he was under surveillance. They don't want us to know all this. They don't have to share all this with us. So you're watching this dude who you think might be a suspect, and you watch him come down with gloves on, throw the trash out. You watch him get in his car, take the gloves off before he gets out of his car, and I'm just assuming here. And before he gets out of his car, he puts on a fresh pair of gloves, walks back up to the house, comes out with a fresh pair of gloves. Because that might be damning also. If they found, I know it wasn't in the receipts as far as what I've seen, but I don't know if they'd put that in there or not. You said because they went to Pennsylvania? Well, I would believe that could have been because he was going to Pennsylvania. You get what I'm saying? Like, the more evidence that you have against somebody that proves that it's them, the better your chances look whenever you're going to arrest this guy and hold him. The more powerful evidence you have that's not circumstantial, because, some of the PCA does sound very circumstantial. I'll admit that. There's a lot of it that, sounds kind of circumstantial. But you're going to want to put as strong of evidence as you can, not only to arrest somebody, but to hold them as well. So if you have a DNA profile and it's as strong as you think it is, and then you get another one that, shows you that it's the father of the DNA that you found, how can you explain that? And I'm not saying that's a smoking gun, because I thought that at the very beginning. I thought that right off the bat. As soon as the PCA came out, I thought, oh, they got him. That's it. The DNA got him. But then I had to think about it a long time to really understand it more, not to just jump to conclusion. Because at the beginning of this case, that's what I was doing. I would jump into conclusions. Every time something would come up new, I'd be trying to fit it into what I already knew, and that was driving me crazy. You know what I mean? That was driving me crazy. So I stopped doing that. I stopped trying to fit in every little new piece of information that they were giving to try to make it make sense for myself. So I found these in a book that I was reading today, and I wanted to read them to you. And I'm not reading them for not any new information that you already don't know, but this author has written this in a way that you wonder how he found out this information. You get what I'm saying? And this is not Howard Bloom. It's from another book. It says on the 13th, Dylan told investigators afterwards she had been sleeping but was woken just before 2 a.m. by her housemates and Ethan, who'd returned to the residence but had not gone straight to bed. Based on investigative reports, there's that word again, she had apparently dozed, fell back into a deep sleep, and was again woken by a commotion in the house, this time shortly after 4 a.m. Dylan could hear what sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog, the golden doodle she shared with Jack DeCur, upstairs on the third floor. Just above her, she could hear Murphy barking and could hear movement across the floor. The sounds were too loud to try to sleep through. So she heard that, and it was loud. So there's many people that say, how could she have not heard anything? Well, she obviously heard this due to investigative reports, whether it be the PCA or whether this author has sources that got information however he got it. It says, from her bedroom, Dylan yelled out to her housemates, asking them to calm down. She was trying to sleep. She shouted up to them, but they didn't answer. She thought she heard Kaylee say, there's someone here. Or maybe it was Anna saying the word. Dylan wasn't sure. Sometimes voices were heard through the vents, the walls, the flooring. Their direction of origin could be obstructed in this old house. So I'm going to ask you this, okay? Those of you in chat, do you think that she heard Kaylee or do you think she heard Xana? What do y'all think? Great point. Maybe that's why he came down and got Xana and Ethan because he mistaked her for being Xana. But that's a great point. That's a great point. Because how would the killer know the differences in the voices? That's a great point. So what do y'all think? Y'all think whoever said there's someone here, do you think that was Kaylee? Or do you think that was Xana? Take a guess. It's okay. I'm not gonna pinpoint you to the wall, and say, well, you said it was Xana, so you're wrong. No, that's not what I'm gonna do. That's not why I'm asking. Because in my opinion, I would believe she'd know the difference between the voices, even if they were through the walls. If Kaylee was playing with the dog, would she not have? Where was she playing with the dog at? Did she hear the sounds from Maddie's room? Or did she hear the sounds from Kaylee's room? Since she was under Maddie's room and Kaylee's room was across the way, like above the kitchen, how would she have been able to hear that if her door was closed? So that tells me that if she heard anything, either Kaylee was outside of her door playing with the dog in the hall, that little hallway right there by the bathroom, or Kaylee was in the room with Maddie with the dog. Because there's someone here, and then the dog is found in Kaylee's room. This happened so quickly. How could that dog have gotten back in Kaylee's room? Do you get what I'm asking? It's how could she have heard those noises coming from upstairs? Yeah. I mean, it just makes my mind go. You know what I mean? It's like as I'm sitting here talking to this with you, I've never thought these questions because otherwise I would have asked them in other lives. Or not playing with the dog more like a struggle. Yeah, that's true. The dog could have been in Kaylee's room and Kaylee could have been in Maddie's room. The struggle was going on. That's very true. But this article said the dog started barking. She could hear Murphy barking and could hear movement across the floor. The sounds were too loud to try to sleep through. Here's another one. Kaylee Gonsalves' bedroom could be seen on the top floor of the residence, and door beneath it was a sliding glass door that led inside. It was a few minutes after 4 a.m. By the time this is suspect vehicle number one shut his vehicle off, stepped into the pavement. In the past few months, the suspect vehicle number one cell phone had utilized the tower serving 1122 had at least a dozen times, always in the late hours of the night like this. His vehicle, all climbing slowly past the residence on each of those nights, then turning back around parking area to the Queen Apartments, preparing for the crime by surveilling the area law enforcement had suggested. He'd coast back down the hill in the darkness each time from the three-story house. So he'd coast down the hill. He wouldn't start the car. Why didn't she text him or get up? Good point. Why would he murder 4 people, 6 in the house? I believe that he murdered 4 people because he got he got the taste of blood. He got the taste of the feel, the rush that most serial killers talk about, watching their victim life exit their body. That is a rush to a lot of them and get them sexually aroused. You've heard of a lot of serial killers that talk about that. I believe it was more about power and control. It was more about possible revenge, not at these people, but at what they symbolized. You know what I mean? Like they symbolized the life that he may have always wanted. Yeah. They symbolized a life that he always wanted but could not obtain for whatever reason. Yeah, like a mad dog. And I'm speculating here. I'm not like I know what I'm this happened, but Occam's razor says the least obstacle that you got to get through the scenario, which makes the most sense without speculation. Because whether people believe it or not, tonight, as I'm talking right now, somebody's being murdered. Somebody's having their house broken into, somebody's ODing, somebody's in a car wreck, somebody is giving birth for the first time. Life is happening. So, you know, for whatever reason, people forget that life is happening around the clock. And they condense this story down. And by story, I'm saying PCA, and I don't believe it's a story, it's a summary of the facts as they understood it through their investigation. But they condensed those facts of evidence for you to be able to walk through that house from the front door and visualize what they saw. How could somebody make this up? How could somebody lie on government paper, on state paper, about something that they saw? People are like, well, they probably didn't even turn their body cams on. How would you know that? How do you know they didn't? I'm sure a lot of this information that was used to write the PCA was stuff that was caught on body cam because it's easier to document something as you're seeing it rather than remember it by heart or by taking notes. You're going to forget something. Is that better? Is that better? Okay, that's good. I think the cord had kind of pulled out or whatever. But, as I was saying, life goes on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there's so much that goes on that we're not even prevalent to. And, it just, for an individual to go into a home, I believe he knew who lived here. Somehow, some way, he knew. He found a way to find his target, whoever it was, whether it was Maddie or whether it was Anna or whether it was both of them. He found a way to to find his target, or maybe this was one of 3 houses that he had picked out, and this is the one, unfortunately, that night that he went towards and committed the act. because I don't believe in all the conspiracy that, the crimes happened at Linda Lane and they were drug over there and, there was other people, there was Aryan Brotherhood and all this other stuff. I don't believe all that. And if I'm wrong, if that comes out in the trial, then I'll swallow it, I'll bow out and give whoever had that theory credit. I would believe that his hand would have been bruised, but by the time the cop pulled him over, it had been a month. So I'm sure he would have healed, you know. But he went to get a haircut and he went to his doctor's appointment. It was 32 degrees the night of the murders. So the next day, a slight snowfall had started to fall. So he could have been wearing gloves because it was cold. There's no there's no reason somebody would be suspicious of you wearing gloves, right? To get a haircut, you wear some gloves, some fabric gloves or fitted gloves or whatever. And the same thing for the doctor's visit. You don't have to. We don't know what type of doctor's visit it was. It could have been to follow up on blood work. He may not have even been checked over. It could have been for anything. The only way he would have had cuts if he would have lost control of the knife. You know. Yes, there were students in his class. I mean, I don't know. I don't know as far as how hard it would have been. I mean, I would think that once somebody is subdued, then they're not going to fight. So you can take your time. As morbid as this sounds, you can take your time killing them because it's not the act of killing the person; it's the act of controlling them, like controlling them through stabbing them. I have control over you now. You have no control over yourself, and that is sad because this crime was very brutal. So he might have not had the knife slip from his hands. He might have not cut himself. I mean, like Elliot Rodger, he practiced with his knife in his room, stabbing his pillows a long time and never cut himself. You know, it can be done. Also, the thickness of the gloves, like somebody was mentioning different types of gloves. If the gloves were thicker, like meat cutting gloves or something that I heard very early on, then there's a possibility he might have not cut himself. You know? Yeah, I mean, I've always wondered that also. Let me read this next one. It said things went quiet now. Murphy no longer barking, and from down the hall, Dylan no longer heard crying. By 4:20, Dylan had locked herself in her bedroom for the remainder of the night. She did not come out until just before noon, when the sun was already high and the bodies of her housemate lay scattered on the second and third floors, enough blood around them to paint the walls. And you know what's sad? I was thinking about this when I read this, and that I screenshotted these for a reason so I could remember what I was going to talk about. Yeah, maybe some hunting gloves. You're right. That little paragraph right there. If there was a lot of blood in Maddie's room and it wasn't soaked up by the mattress, then wouldn't it have possibly dripped down the walls into Dylan's room, just like it did outside the house in Xana's room? I was thinking that today. I was like, I wonder if there was any blood that like went through the floor into the bottom bedroom where Dylan was. I mean, because it was enough blood in the other room to go outside the house. And I know that's probably a silly thought, but you know, that's just where my mind goes. I'm just like, looking and asking myself questions, I'm sure I believe they said it was blood. And this says, "Ar- around the hall from her to the left was the shared kitchen, and down the hallway to the right was Anna's bedroom, where Ethan had been staying over a lot. Nothing looked out of the ordinary that direction either." They're talking about when Dylan looked outside her door the first time. She closed her bedroom door and started to return to bed. But then she heard more commotion. Somebody in Xana's bedroom was crying, but she wasn't sure who. All she knew was that she heard what sounded like tears. So she could hear crying from Xana's room. She again opened the bedroom door and peeked out. While she saw nothing remarkable, she heard a male voice say what she thought was, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." It sounded like it came from Xana's room. Maybe Xana had been crying and Ethan was going to help with whatever was wrong, Dylan thought. She was exhausted from all the noise keeping her awake. So was she in a stupor? Was she like barely awake? When you're tired and you really can't differentiate different things, like you feel like you're in a dream half the time. You're so tired that, you're awake, you're asleep, you're awake, you're asleep, and certain things just kind of they don't they don't register as clearly. But soon she heard more crying, and for a third time she opened her bedroom door. This time she saw a man dressed all in black clothing with a black mask covering his mouth and his nose. He was walking toward Dylan in the dark. An athletic looking person, but not muscular, 5'10" or taller, with bushy eyebrows. Had he been partying with the roommates? Was he one of the many new friends they'd made during the first month of school? She didn't know. Dylan stood in her bedroom door watching him pass. He was not rushed, but not casual either. Just a man leaving one place for somewhere else. The man brushed lightly past Dylan's doorway without acknowledging her. He exited through the sliding glass door that led to the second floor patio, where warm weather parties would occur and where the wooded slope behind their house led to the often trafficked parking platform on higher ground. A man in a mask who'd left the house but not run from it. So that's creepy in itself to read that, you know? That is creepy. A man walking by like these questions were. Was it another party goer? Was it the last one of the night leaving? Was it somebody that, was a new friend? But I just wonder what caused her to go into the frozen shock phase. What gave her such a fear that she went into the frozen shock phase? It says Kaylee Gonsalves' bedroom could be seen on the top floor of the residence. On the floor beneath it, sliding glass door that led inside. It was a few minutes after 4 by the time the suspect shut his vehicle off and stepped into the pavement. Did I already read this? No, I don't think so. In the past few months, the sub's cell phone had utilized the tower serving 1122 King Road at least a dozen times, always in the late hours of the night like this. His vehicle allegedly climbing slowly past the residence on each of these nights, and turning back around in the parking area of the Queen Road apartments, preparing for his crime by surveilling the area. Law enforcement had suggested he'd coast back downhill in the darkness each time. The three-story King Road house just outside his driver's side window as he passed, the body of his vehicle low to the ground. On the night of the murder, the sub was dressed all in black with a covering over his face from the bridge of his nose downward. In the dark, he crossed the concrete and then made his way through the brush toward 1122 King Road's unlocked sliding glass door on the second floor patio. Built against the hillside, the second floor of the residence was easily accessible at the first and even more inviting to outsiders with its open deck and overhead twinkle lights. So somebody asked if they believed a flashlight was used. I don't believe a flashlight was used because those string of light that were on the patio, I believe they would have lit up enough that he could have seen into the kitchen, at least into that little foyer, enough to tell where the stairs were and where the other part of the house was. So I hope that answers your question. And it says, I don't know where he got this from. He'd coast back downhill in the darkness each time. The 3-story King Road house just outside the driver's side window as he passed the body of his vehicle low to the ground. So, have you ever thought of this as well? I just thought of this. How would they know that he coached downhill each time? Unless there was other video surveillance that gave them a pattern of this person being seen. Like people just think that he was observed the night of the crime. You know, some people save their surveillance stuff. Sometimes it's not erased. Sometimes it's backed up on a cloud somewhere. So you match up the dates that the pings pinged in that area. So you look at the surveillance camera and you see the car just coasting down the hill, the same car without a license plate, the same car each time, going the same way. How hard is it to think the process of elimination? What do y'all think about that? You think that's far fetched? It says in the dark, he crossed the concrete and then made his way through the brush toward 1122 King Road's unlocked sliding glass door. Built against the hillside, I already read that. The unsub opened the glass slider and stepped into the kitchen. He would have crossed in darkness and taken a small stairway that wrapped to the third floor, where 2 of the girls had been preparing for sleep. In the old house, according to a previous tenant, the threads of landing of the stairwood would have creaked, but just slightly. By the time the sub was upstairs, the golden doodle, not much older than a puppy, began to bark. The audio was picked up by a neighboring camera. So this says that not long after 4 o'clock, this barking started, and it was picked up by a camera. So that's never been mentioned. If that is true, that's never been mentioned. Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogan leaked blood onto the mattress, where they might have died almost immediately, and the golden doodle shut into another bedroom across the hall eventually quieted. The sub went back downstairs, creaking toward the second floor landing and the small hallway off the kitchen that led into the communal living room where the King Road girls had filmed TikTok videos, sometimes drinking and often laughing. That is so sad. That is so sad. What do y'all think about that? It's quite interesting. I thought it was, anyways. I thought it was interesting enough to present it to you guys tonight. Always try to put some stuff out there that not just stick to one path. Always try to make people think a little bit on logical scenarios, not so far fetched that you think, how did he get to that result? You know what I mean? I'm not trying to break the case. I'm not trying to solve the case. But as much as I've taken with the criminal justice courses that I've been taking, I've learned a little bit, you know? I've learned a little bit of stuff and how it actually goes together. So I try to present that in the videos that I do to keep what I learned fresh, you know? I don't try to outsmart other creators. I don't try to, you know, compete with anybody because, like I've told you before, the only person I compete with is myself. But I hope you enjoy the content. I really do. I hope the new subs, you are enjoying the content. Even if you don't get in here to chat, I hope that on replays you'll enjoy the content. Please stop the merch. Please stop by the merchandise store and check out the merchandise. Even if you don't buy, you don't have to buy anything. But check out the merchandise. See if there's anything that you could possibly think about purchasing in the near future if that's what you choose. The same thing with the memberships. I will be giving away 5 new free memberships probably in a couple weeks. Um, I'll do it randomly, so if you're in the chat, you could potentially win a free membership. And that's how I did it at the beginning. So that's how I'm going to do it. Um, Child abduction in Ingram, Texas, silver 2014 Nissan Versa, TLS 5425, Texas. Victim is a 6-year-old white male, Cameron Parrish. Suspect is a 32-year-old white female, Talia Graham. Call 911 with the information. Do y'all get Amber Alerts? Man, that thing blows up all the time. Blows up all the time. People being abducted. So I really don't think that I'm going to talk about the change of venue anymore. Like I said, I did that the other night. I talked about my thoughts about it. I talked about, the differences in things. But if you're in any of those chats, when people are giving you their impression of, spending time in jail or, in prison or knowing this or that, it's okay to question them. It's okay to fact check because, people want receipts from other people. So it's okay for you to fact check because, not everybody tells the truth. And if you listen to people long enough, you're going to be able to pick out the lies or the inconsistencies. I don't even want to say lies because, they could be telling the truth. They could just get their story different. You tell the inconsistencies of their story the longer they tell those stories. So whenever you're listening to people and their interpretation of the criminal justice system, you know, I would wonder how they know so much about certain things. They didn't study it. They could have been jailhouse lawyers. Who knows? Because I recently ran into another channel where this guy was talking about um, being in jail or doing time or whatever. And he was diagramming a bunch of thoughts about, the court process and law enforcement, this and that. But then he came back and he said, well, once I was on the wrong side of the law, then I went to school to start learning about the right side of the law. And he's basically doing what I'm doing. He's telling the criminal justice side versus the myth and misunderstandings or misquotes of other people. Kind of like the other day, I heard somebody misquote that the PCA was a theory, knowing that the PCA is not a theory. You don't theorize the PCA. That is a summary of a policeman's account of the evidence that they viewed while they were investigating. That's not the DNA, that's not any of that stuff. That is merely just the visual component of what they saw as they were walking through the crime scene. That's not a theory. If you're theorizing something, that would mean that you would say, I think that's blood on the floor, or I think that's a broken lampshade, or I think that broken lampshade was used in hitting the person over the head, and that's what caused the blood on the floor. And the blood on the floor was from the person that ran out the door because the door was busted open, and therefore we found a footprint in the dirt down the driveway, and then we saw a camera that caught a vehicle speeding off. That is a theory because you don't have any evidence to base all those scenarios up. Like if you have fingerprints, you have any kind of fibers, if you have any kind of, things to support your theory, then it's a fact. Otherwise, it's just speculating. Just speculating. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, guys. Please hit the like button if you haven't already, or like I said earlier, hit the dislike button. I'd rather see 100 dislikes and 12 likes when I see 150 people viewed this than to see 25 likes. Knowing that people viewed it, if only for a couple of minutes, hey, if you didn't like it, you didn't like it. That's cool. It's not going to hurt my feelings. I don't do this for people to like it. I do it for people to enjoy the outcome and be knowledgeable more than anything. So it's not going to hurt me personally if you like it or don't like it. But all's good. You have a wonderful night. And one more question. Can you dig it? Can you dig it? I hope you can. Maestro, cue that music.